Good morning. Nolan Bowerly here, Bitcoiner, author of The Satoshi Wedding Murders, and host of this show, The Breakup, a show about breaking up with the fiat system. I to reiterate, because it's a new show, still don't have many viewers. I want to repeat a little bit about what the show is about at the beginning of each one. So it's just about breakup, like it's about mindsets, right? And for me, it's not about trading a bit of your dollars for some Bitcoin. That's the start of it, right? But really, what it's about is about breaking up with an old system. And the breakup mindset, I think, is the most helpful when it comes to leaving behind what dollars meant to you and what Bitcoin can do for you. So we're going to cover that material every day, and we come up with reasons to break up with the fiat system. So we take a few stories every day about stuff that's happening in the news that just shows that this is just someone you got to split on, man. They're useless, dragging you down. So that's the frame we take. It's not any more fancy. We do talk about some stuff that's a little complicated. You can't help but talk about numeraires. We're going to get to that today, and some other stuff. But I hope not to bore you, and I hope to keep it with the actual frame, which is just breaking up with this people. You know what I mean? Like in a relationship with Joe Biden right now, and all these folks, and you were in a right. He was in charge of a lot of stuff. Not to overstate the power of these people. I'm also not someone who thinks that all of these leaders need to be revered at all. I worked in a national government quite a long time. I worked for Prime Minister Stephen Harper in Canada for a long time when he took power. So I've seen a lot about what goes on over there, and trust me, I was black-pilled on leadership long before Bitcoin came out. Bitcoin just happened to be able to save my, predictive ability. I was at a loss in 2012 on how to predict some things in the future. I didn't know what to build the future out of, and Bitcoin came, and ever since it's been a lot easier for me to predict the future, and I've been right about a lot of the stuff. I was sure Trump was going to win in 2015 for a lot of the things that I was seeing. Not that I had to care. I was already into Bitcoin by then. So, it's as great as Trump was for Bitcoin, Biden's even better. And we're going to get into that a lot on this show. So, we spent a lot of time studying these things in my past. I was a lawyer. I worked in the Senate in Canada, as I said. I worked for CoinDesk for a long time. When they were first brought to New York City, I helped build what came out of that place. I wasn't the first generation of CoinDesk. I don't want to take credit for work I didn't do, but certainly did a lot there. And was at Kraken for a while, but now I'm another one of these Bitcoiners who doing my own thing, man. I'm on my own. I got a little events business. We're having a good time, but this project is really the main thing now in the book. So let's get right into the material. You want to hear some news, not crap about me. So we're going to start today. I want to read what Biden said regarding food. He was asked by the journalists when he was at that crazy thing in Rome what he thought. And I tried to write it down. I don't want to make fun of the guy too much, right? He is an old person, and I'm not here to laugh. There'll be no, elderly shaming or fat shaming or anything on this show. We're not that into that stuff. But we got to laugh at these people somehow, because this is not great, right? So he says, one of the reasons why I decided to talk about the need to deal with the operation and the gouging that occurs in some of the pricing of beef and chicken and other things is that I think it's why it's indicated to you that we were going to look at the violation of antitrust laws and what they're doing. So there's a lot to look at, but the bottom line is that I think that anyone who would prefer, as bad as things are in terms of prices, helping hurting families right now, would trade this Thanksgiving for that Thanksgiving. I'm sorry I put you through that. I mean, it's unbelievable. This is what people asked for, and that's what they got. They got this guy, and he's telling us all about antitrust laws and food prices. Of course, food now is going crazy. I held up for the thumbnail for this. I held up a small brisket I bought recently, and it was $50, and it's a good quality brisket, but it's not a big one. It'll barely feed my family of four. I'm happy. I'm not worried about the prices, but I don't know how people do it, right? I don't know how people can afford some of this stuff. And my prediction. So one thing we want to do in the show all the time is predict, right? Because to me, predicting especially public like this. That's why I'm doing this show. I need to a public place to make some predictions, and I hope it'll help you guys, and I hope you'll help me correct myself if I ever get stuff wrong, because that's the only way we can operate here. You predict, however good your prediction was at forecasting, to me, is how well you understood the world in the time you made the prediction, right? So if you have a great worldview now, you can test it by knowing how well you predict the future, right? If you predict wrong, you got to go back and look at why you got it wrong, right? If you were one of these people saying, "Oh, Trump's going to get killed by Hillary," right up until the last minute, you never even thought he was going to win, right? You should have looked back about why you got it wrong. And everyone who did, I think, came out ahead, right? It wasn't about right or wrong. It's about looking about why you got it wrong, right? You don't bask in your error. And I've done that with Bitcoin from the start. There's lots of stuff that I predicted that I got wrong, and I've had to adjust my own opinion of Bitcoin accordingly. Um, when Mike Hearn wrote that article in 2015, some of you OG Bitcoiners might remember that. One of the original, like, say, stewards of Bitcoin, ran out on Bitcoin in 2015. It caused quite a stir, right? And I predicted it was going to be trouble, and I was wrong. I was wrong instantly, right? But it forced me to learn about a lot of things around decentralized governance, because that was essentially a leader at Bitcoin in the early days, when those things were almost necessary. And it didn't work out, so it was a big test. And these predictions are important, right? So we got to predict on the show and then go back and look at it. So here's a prediction. The prediction is lots of price controls coming for food, right? They got to help people, right? They're not going to let people starve, because everybody knows what happens if you let these people starve. Much bigger problems on your hands for governments and things like that. So they got to make sure people are fed, which I think we all can agree with, right? The goal we all agree with. We don't want starving people in America or anywhere in the world, right? We don't want starving people, right? We can all agree on that. Doesn't matter your political party, doesn't matter if you're a Bitcoiner, doesn't matter anything. You don't want starving people, right? No matter what. No matter what, if it's Rohan Gray and the biggest no coiners you ever saw in your life, right? You want them to eat, right? Nobody wants starving people in the world. But how do you get there, right? That's the issue. So they're gonna go for price controls, right? So what does that mean? What does the price controls mean? It can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean farmers just won't get up for work. That's the whole Atlas Shrugged argument. Atlas Shrugged is smart people holding up the world, and they just give up. Like, I'm not gonna do this crap. It's stupid. What happens if farmers do that? What happens if the farmers give up? Because it's not worth it. They got price controls, right? So I guess the government will buy some. But anyway, that's not the way it's going to work. They're going to make sure, the money printers are going to make sure the industrial farms stay open, and they're going to give them as much of the USD that's possible. But what's going to happen when that goes down that way? What's the industrial farms going to do with all that money, right? What is it going to do to the whole system? Well, the model I like to use to understand this is actually Wall Street, right? This was sort of the first, food is about to go into the welfare system, basically, right? It's about to become, nationalized, for lack of a better word, with price controls. But they already did that to Wall Street, right? They already did that to Wall Street. In the 1990s, right? Because the US dollar was already experiencing its 1970s inflation, right? The velocity was coming down. They had printed some money, and then they had to stop, and then we went through the 80s where they raised the interest rates, and now we get into the 90s, and America has sort of figured it out. It went through a real market cycle, had some blood, and now communism fell. We go through the 90s, and America is just drunk on success. There's the 1950s showed a great chasm between America and the rest of the world as far as military. The 90s, you could feel it in living standards, right? I don't know if the top countries and the bottom countries have ever had such a gulf as they had in the 1990s. I mean, in the 90s, we were basically living in the modern world, right? Very recognizable to what we have today. I mean, I was downloading music, movies, Napster. This is all the 90s, right? And, I had the internet. I kind of remember not having the internet in my life, but not really. So everything came. We were doing great, and then there was this industry, Wall Street, that was about to burst the bubble, right? The huge party that America had been going through the whole 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union, Cold War, all that stuff, the big party was coming to an end because the dot-com bubble was about to burst. Right? So a whole section of the economy was going to have to suffer the normal pains of Keynesian market cycles. Well, the government said no, right? They said there was a moral obligation. Pardon me, not the government. Excuse me. Error. Don't want to repeat that error, right? They're not the government. The Federal Reserve is not the government. The Federal Reserve came out and said, I remember the 90s. I remember when Greenspan would speak, the world stopped, right? Because almost everything was running on these policies at the time, especially when the dot-com stuff came out. And he said he had a sort of moral obligation to get involved, right? A moral obligation, right? So he got involved. So he kind of took some risk out of what they had done. No one had to pay the price for the losses of the dot-com. Really, I mean, some careers, the entrepreneurs, but I mean the bros, the Wall Street bros, right? It's kind of a write-off. And then we come to the '08 financial crisis, and it happens again, right? Wall Street bros blew a tire, and they got de-risked again, right? Same way. So it's two de-riskings, right? They took the risk out of it. Now, one of the things that made me predictive about Bitcoin, one of the things that made me really predictive, is in the early days, I got to meet all of the original Wall Street people who peeled out and went into crypto. The Chad Cascarillas, he's running the Itbit and he had the exchange for a long time. The Arthur Hayeses, all these kind of guys, right? Now, what I saw was people who were not in it for a bit of money, but people who actually wanted the risk, right? Risk is what does bring a lot of people to trading and Wall Street and all that, but it had been de-risked. You couldn't lose. I mean, you just had to listen to Munger or one of these other old guys, buy a basket, buy a fund, buy an ETF, buy an index, right? You're gonna be fine. Don't hire financial. They were right. Don't hire the advisors. Don't do any of that stuff, right? Just buy the market and you'll be set, because the market can't go down. They would have been de-risked, right? You'd be an idiot if you lost money. You could blow up individually by taking on too much risk. That was possible, right? You could blow up individually because you took on too much risk, right? But that's a little bit like, and to use a vulgar analogy, that would be like, you can get, some kind of an STD if you only watch pornos, right? You can, watch, someone's around. It's possible to be dirty enough to get into some trouble, right? But you got to really go out of your way, right? And it was a little bit the same in Wall Street. You had to go out of your way to get into trouble. You had to go out of your way to not make money, right? If you didn't come out ahead of what the market was, I mean, just kill yourself. You're not going to make it, right? So they had de-risked Wall Street. So what had happened was the people who want risk, right, they were coming into Bitcoin, right? You could see them because they just, the feeling of winning and losing is gone in the other system, right? There was no winning and losing. It was all winning, right? It was all winning. Everybody's a winner making our game, So now you got people, the best, the real ones, the real adrenaline junkies, right? The real cowboys leaving Wall Street to trade Bitcoins because you could win or lose, right? There was a trouble, and that's where you get into the leverage and the this and the that. And these guys were having a great time. But it became easy to predict. It became easy to predict that the financial side of Bitcoin was going to grow because these people were coming. And of course, that was right? And here they all are. So here's the prediction, even for Wall Street, right? For Bitcoin going forward, and then I'll bring it back to the food. Wall Street had de-risked so much that they basically made it into a porno, right? But Bitcoin is going to teach them what it's like to get fucked, pardon my language, for real. Wall Street made it a porno. Bitcoin is going to teach them what it's like to get fucked for real. That's coming. We're here. We're there, right? The real lessons, real risk, real win. So they're going to learn. Now, to bring it back to this whole issue of food and all. Oh yeah, this is a. We'll get to that in a second. My prediction is they're going to get into the controls, right? They're going to get into price controls at the supermarket. They're going to try to nationalize food distribution in America, which is going to be wild, right? It's going to be a shock for a lot of people. But what's going to come out of it is an epic collapse, right? An epic collapse, because there's going to be it's not the same as Wall Street. That can become contained, right? You can contain it to those people because there's enough of them. You can use the Cantillon effect, right? The Cantillon effect, the separation of wealth, the richest and the poorest, right? Which is what happens with 0% interest, right? Because money is cheap for some, not for others, and over time they'll grow apart, right? So they grew apart, right? But in food, you don't have the pressure valve of Cantillon, right? There's no way for it to go unless you do the bug thing, right? When they're talking about the bugs all the time and all that stuff, and all these Soylent Green people and all that stuff. So they talk about all this stuff, but it's going to be a lot harder, right? It's going to be a lot harder. And that's one of the major advantages that Bitcoin is going to have, is that you're going to be able to buy real food with it, right? Real food from small farmers and all that kind of stuff, because their mind will have already switched to what's real, right? They're not gonna sell their inventory for some promises, right? Those days are ending. You can sell equities and psychological commodities and things like that. That was possible, but it's going to be a lot harder with food, right? A lot harder. So I think we'll see price controls, but quality and the effects of merchants and the pristine nature of Bitcoin's collateral as collateral, I think is gonna change consumption, right? It's going to change consumption. First, food consumption. So that's what we have to look forward to. Yeah, this is the thing this is the thing I put on my I tweeted this. It's a Bob Dylan song, right? It's a breakup song. You can most likely go your way and I'll go mine. But I adapted the first few words for Bitcoin, and the way I say it is, I just can't do what I done before. I just can't save USD anymore. I'm gonna let them pass, yeah, and I'll stack sats. Then time will tell just who has fell and who's been left behind. When the printer goes one way and I go mine. Um, so that's an affirmation I try to say every day, or used to anyway, in order to get me sort of pumped up for for stacking sats. Right now, the last piece I want to mention today is the, let's call it, volatile research that comes from something like Wall Street because of the effects of this de-risking and the money printing and etc. And that is that, and this is a tweet that Jordan Peterson put out today. He says, the climate modelers say they can model the most complex system in the world, but try one stock, right? Try modeling one stock first before you even model the entire climate, right? And I say, yeah, that's a super good frame, but it reminds me of why it's so challenging to even model one stock right now, right? All, all, 100%. I'm not. There's no joke. There's no. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. I'm not trying to exaggerate, right? All, 100% of Wall Street research produced before March 2020 is useless. I mean, you can't use it. It doesn't mean anything. Any model that they have can't predict anymore. Whereas in Bitcoin, we're mostly on target. This is that prediction thing again, right? We've predicted forward pretty much on target. Look at that plan B stock to flow. I'm not a fan totally. I don't believe in it. I'm not predicting. I'm not saying it is correct, but it's predictive, right? It's on schedule. So when you look at models that are able to accurately predict, right, you've got to hold them in higher esteem looking backwards. You have to. Or if they fail to predict anything, you've got to look back and say they're useless. There isn't a piece of research that could be given to me from any Wall Street firm from before March 2020 that I would say predicted anything that we see today. Nothing, right? And that's a big change. That's a big change. And when people say Bitcoin's volatile, only if you look at the price. I think the volatility of an entire industry losing its research, its entire history of research, is pretty volatile. What are they going on now? The guy who just said all this stuff about price controls and antitrust and food, that's the guy, right? That's why we got to break up with these people. Like, you don't even want to have to analyze this stuff in the end, right? It's like when you're sitting there telling someone you're breaking up, I'm thinking about breaking up, and then like going through all these little stories and anecdotes. Shut up. Just break up. Grab a girl. Grab a couple more. Right? Get out of there. It ain't working. Get out of there. And that's what it comes down to, right? We're talking about food now, and we got this guy who doesn't even know what he's talking about, right? And he's going to rely on people whose research is garbage to fund a thing where they're going to try and feed you, but they're going to screw the whole thing up. I mean, you gotta be able to say it out loud and predict it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll adapt my thinking. I'm trying to, like, I would like to be wrong. That's why I'm doing this publicly, because I don't really have a tally of how often I'm right and how often I'm wrong. It feels like I'm always right, but I'm sure I'm wrong. And I'm trying to find that out, right? So a public record is going to help me discover where I get things wrong from time to time. So here we are. So that's why we got to break up. I always want to contrast in this show with one story about something positive, besides reasons why you have to break up. And by positive, I mean proper incentive alignments happening in Bitcoin and things like that. So that's the contrast I want to be able to provide. So on this show, I'll mention a bit about my book. I released a book yesterday, first chapter anyway, not the whole thing, but it will reward early fans. Right? I want to make it a vehicle to get people their first Bitcoin. It is a Bitcoin science fiction book called The Satoshi Wedding Murders. A little bit about why you need to be afraid as a Bitcoiner, where the line of violence is coming from, like what will make sense in terms of violence in the future. It will be different than today. Right now, violence is, go protect some oil, right? Go maybe get some food, right? That's the line of violence, but that's going to change, and it will be things like personal security around Bitcoin, and you're going to see a bit of that in my book. But the point is, the first readers, I hope anyway, to be able to create a royalty mechanism, right? A royalty mechanism that will pay people in Bitcoin a portion of the profits that I make from selling the book. It's going to be half the profits, right? So what I'm basically trying to beat is the normal printing publishing industry's model. The normal publishing industry's model is pretty busted and broken. They give you like 5 to 10% of the overall. They pay you the royalties, by the way. You know what I mean? Like, I've tried to readapt a true royalty contract, which there's two real types of royalty contracts in the world that are at scale today: oil and gas royalties, and the other is book publishing and media royalties, right? But they're two different types of contracts. The oil and gas one is more what you would recognize a royalty contract to be like, and more what mine is like. I own land. There's oil underneath that land. I can't get the oil out. You give me some money. You create a company, whatever, pump it, mine it, pump that oil out, and then pay me my royalty, right? What I'm owed as owner. Um, so with publishing, it's pretty backwards. In the end, you sell the publisher the rights, more or less, right? They acquire them, and they pay you a royalty, like you're some grifter around the project, right? You're just another person they owe some money to, but they own it, right? They own it, and so mine is not that. And you only get like 5 to 10. The best get 20, right? The best get 20. So what I'm doing is, I'm selling a book on Amazon like anyone else for cash, right? For dollars, because that's what's at scale right now. And I can't imagine convincing my Bitcoin friends to part with Bitcoin. I made a Bitcoin off a book years ago, but that was a long, long time ago in the old days. And it was more charity at the time, me saying I want to make my first Bitcoin off of some sci-fi stuff. And it happened, but it's 2014 or something like that. And so the point is, if this royalty, project works, I would give 50% of the money, turn into Bitcoin, make it available to people who own whatever percentage of my overall royalties you own. You get that percentage of the 50%. Amazon takes 30, right? That's the platform fee, right? They take 30, so that's already out. But if I give 50 to readers and I give 30 to Amazon, that leaves me with 20, right? It's a lot better than I'd get from mainstream media publishing. They give me 5 to 10. If I'm Stephen King, maybe 20, right? Maybe. but I get the sweet deal without anybody, right? So that's what we're going to do. So go have a look at the book. It's on my website. I put chapter 1 up on Medium. You can find it on my Twitter. That's CountBTC. And see you again next time, everyone. I hope we start getting more live, folks. I want to make this a live show. I think it'll be fun. We'll have a new way of getting to answers together. All right, everyone. Thanks for your time.